Hello, my beautiful people. Welcome back. I'm Mel, and you are listening to Wilma the Wonder Hens podcast. Today's episode, we're going to discuss the reproductive system of our hens. Yes, so many things can go wrong. Those ladies are super tough, but they are also quite delicate. We get into a discussion of a few other things, flock management, and some pretty interesting things. And at the end, Jennifer does surprise me with a question, and it actually had me speechless. So, yeah, which is very unusual. So, without further ado, let's get into this. Are you excited about your trip, though?
I'm very excited about my trip. At the same time, I have some trepidation because I'm leaving my girls. And
Hey y'all, I'm Mel, and you are listening to Wilma the Wonder Hen. Are you a chicken mouth loving mama or daddy? Together we'll dive into the latest poultry keeping adventures, chat about everyday life, with a generous mix of some hilarious stories. Bringing you fascinating interviews with poultry owners from all over. You'll find tips and basic advice from your local veterinarian, along with new chicken keeping gadgets and reviews. I'm going to see what Mr. Jangles and Wilma has to say about that. We're going to encourage and help you build a stronger, healthier flock. Let's go see what Mr. Jangles and Wilma is up to. Let's go let these heifers out.
5 weeks is a long time. So, they'll be good. They'll be happy being out at the farm, especially they'll be happy. I wasn't going to initially take them out there, but we've done some additional tests and the vet has given the all clear. So they don't even know why what is happening with those two. So I'm going to take it back to bad animal husbandry issues, breeding practices from whatever the hatchery is that the feed store that I was buying them from is getting them from. So
Did you ever find out who is the provider of the chicks there?
Yes. And I called them and I spoke to them and they sent messages through on the IBD positive. They say they don't, they say that they don't vaccinate, but the thing is that if my girls, IBD kills, right? So it's, if they had gotten it at his chick, I would have expected to lose them or at least some of them during the time where they were susceptible to getting it. And I don't know. It's a weird thing. So I'm just wondering if maybe the parents or the mom had some immunity and she just passed it through. Or maybe the mom's a carrier. And again, because she's an active carrier, she still passed some of her immunity through to the chicks. So it's hard to say.
But my understanding, though, with it, like if it was an NPIP, wouldn't that be something that was tested for? Maybe it depends on the state?
Maybe it depends on the state. I don't know. To be honest, I really don't know. You would think, because the hatchery's in Arizona, so I can't say what Arizona state requires.
Right. I understand.
And to ship the chicks, there isn't really anything that's required other than them. I think that they might have to attest that they're free from avian, and I think there's a couple of others that have to be tested for. I don't know that part for interstate shipping. I haven't really had to be responsible for shipping livestock. Well, that's not true. I've done livestock, but it was horses and cows and stuff. So we were testing for like equine encephalitis and hoof and mouth and those kinds of things for cross-state health certificates. Haven't done poultry, so I don't know.
But so far, all the rest of your girls are fine, though, right?
Everybody's fine, and we did the course of antibiotics. She had me do a 14-day course of oxytetracycline on the whole flock because of the diarrhea issues, and the diarrhea has kind of cleared up at this point. There'll be an occasional loose stool, but what I was seeing before with the diarrhea has gone away. So it could have just been some gut issue that was kind of going around through the flock.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. You never know. They always come up with something. They just
do.
love to entertain us and educate us.
They do.
The greatest education you'll get with owning chickens is owning chickens. So, I mean, it's great to be prepared, and we always talk about being prepared and stuff. But once you're in it, that's when you got to really ramp it up and figure out things that are going on. And a lot of times you have to just eliminate things because, obviously they can't tell you what's going on. But
yeah, like as an example, I had a spray that we were using to clean down the deck and stuff, to help combat with flies and those kinds of things. And I basically just told the gardener who was using it, I was like, only use this on the dog side, don't use it on the chicken side, because I didn't know if maybe it was a contributing factor to the cancer as an instance. But it's not supposed to. It's supposed to be non-toxic, biodegradable. It's made for cleaning animal spaces, but I just don't know, so I'm just going to eliminate that.
We hope and everything just turns out just fine and dandy.
I hope so too. I'm hoping I don't have to deal with any more of those for a while. It'll be nice if I can just get the Bumblefoots cleared up.
Yeah, Mr. Tuck is back to Bumblefoot again. He's the only one, but for some reason, I just think it never fully cleared up. I mean, Bumblefoot someone asked me the other day, do X, Y, and Z, and it's cleared up, right? And I'm like, not really, because if you miss any tiny little bit of that infection in there, it's gonna come right back. So even the best chicken keepers, that really pay attention and stuff happens. So okay.
Yep, it does. It's just the nature of the beast. Doesn't make you a bad animal keeper simply because your animals end up with Bumblefoot. Inevitably, if you keep chickens, you will be dealing with Bumblefoot at some point.
Yeah, I only say that because I saw it, someone post about, my chickens never get Bumblefoot, my chickens never get sick, all these things. And it's, because I pay attention to them, which is great. I'm glad that they are proud of, that effort that they make, but it kind of discounts those who, reality wise, most of us that I know are really trying. So it doesn't make you a bad chicken mama. So it's okay, people. But anyways, that's not why we have you here, but we are so excited because I absolutely adore you. Jennifer is very, very, very smart and very knowledgeable, but not just that. She is probably one of my very, very special friends that I just adore. I love you too. I also want y'all to know that a lot of people ask, or they try and give advice on this or that or whatever. And I don't want to be rude to them because when I post something, I'm not actually asking for advice. I have a mentor, which actually is Miss Jennifer and our local veterinarian. So when I say that, I don't want people to misunderstand. I'm not being rude. I'm not looking for advice because I have some of the best advice, the best people that I can actually go to. So the knowledge I pass on to you is from them, if that makes sense. So it's kind of a trickle-down effect.
I would say that that's the same for me, Mel, because you're my sounding board too when I'm having to work through a problem or if I haven't experienced something yet and I need tips. And because 9 times out of 10, you've either gone through it or someone who has, and you have the answers for me as well.
Yeah, so we don't say that to be rude in any way. I appreciate people sharing their, what has worked for them and that, but don't take offense if I don't accept that advice and I go other places to look for advice. Okay, so we get that out of the way. But the reason why Jennifer is here, we want to talk a little bit. I actually wanted this episode to be because of the situation with Miss Coco, with my Coco last year. Symptoms that had come up and I kind of overlooked them because of her age. So they kind of coincided with some of the things that we turned out to be, well, kind of back up. Coco passed away January and we had a necropsy done and it came back as EYP. So the reason why I wanted Jennifer to come on is to kind of share what that is, the things that are involved in that, symptoms, things that I overlooked because I based it on age. Like Coco was 8 years old. So some of those things kind of overlapped for me. So we kind of want Jennifer to go over that. I know a lot of people in our community, they've had chickens that have passed from this, and maybe there are risk factors we can talk about. Hi, Jennifer. How are you
Hello.
today?
I'm
Hi.
good. How are you?
We are
I just wanted
fabulous.
to create a disclaimer. I'm not an expert on this subject in any way, shape, or form, but I'm going to share with you as much information as I personally have at this time.
Yes, that was our disclaimer. Jennifer is not a veterinarian. She is a very knowledgeable retired
Registered veterinary technician.
Yes, sorry.
That's okay.
My brain went dumb.
That's all right.
Which is a lot of times, but I'm going to let Jennifer take over from here. So,
yeah, so egg yolk peritonitis is actually relatively common. One of the things I've learned is that it actually does become a more prevalent problem as hens age. So an advanced age can be a contributing factor. But basically what egg yolk peritonitis is that the egg yolk, rather than when it is released, rather than it going into the fallopian tube and making its way through the standard process, it actually escapes into the abdominal cavity and usually ends up affixing itself to the peritoneum. Hence the egg yolk peritonitis, because this is inflammation of the peritoneum. Symptoms typically include lethargy, as it advances, inability to stand and walk, loss of appetite, drinking. You can also notice distension of the abdomen, so it'll even mimic ascites, where like you'll get fluid in the abdomen. And the only way to know the difference between that, between ascites and whether or not it's egg yolk peritonitis, is actually to do a centesis, pull fluid from the abdominal cavity and look at it underneath a microscope to see if you actually observe any of the egg yolk materials in the fluid. So it can be difficult, and it can easily be something else other than egg yolk peritonitis that can be causing the symptoms. But yeah, egg yolk peritonitis is usually one of the first things we think about when we see some of these things in a bird that was otherwise okay. Because usually ascites doesn't just happen overnight, right? Whereas with egg yolk peritonitis, it comes on really quick, and the bird can go down really quick from that.
Okay, when we talk about where the egg yolk is not going through the oviduct like it's supposed to, right? And it's not coming out of the cloaca. Instead, it kind of embeds itself into the abdominal cavity. I did read somewhere where it does have the potential to reabsorb. The chicken can reabsorb that, so it won't be, it may have happened in all of your chickens or hens and you just never knew it. I'm not saying that is the case, but I did read some research where it can reabsorb and not become a problem. But then there's also, things like lash egg and where the bacteria gets up into the oviduct and it can cause the bacterial infection. And these are different things like cancer, twisting of the oviduct, things that are genetically that you can't control. Like they're genetically, that's just part of your bird's genetics that they're.
Yeah. I would just say that if your bird is experiencing these symptoms, the best thing that you can do to treat them is to give them palliative care. So palliative care, what is that? You're going to start them on electrolyte fluids. You're going to offer them a mash, try and get them to eat and drink, because ultimately if they're not eating and drinking, that's going to be what causes them to go down faster than anything else. Fortunately, with egg yolk peritonitis or something that is bacterial, if they are showing symptoms of that way, without antibiotics, there's not going to be much that you're going to be able to do in order to probably save them long term. But that's not to say that there's no reason to give palliative care, because it's always entirely possible that they might be able to kind of just let their body's natural immunity work through whatever they're dealing with and come out the other side okay. So, I mean, that would be my suggestion.
I know, like with Coco, some of the symptoms with her in real life, I know there's textbooks symptoms, but last year I noticed in July, so that she would have been 7, she stopped laying eggs. So it really wasn't a concern because, she was old. So no big deal. She stopped laying eggs. And then I noticed during the summer months, she had a little bit of diarrhea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that is also part of it, but it was also very hot and they were consuming a lot of water, which is, not a big concern because that's what happens during the summer. They can get a little bit of diarrhea. They're taking in more fluids and it's going through their body quickly. And then she also, I noticed a little bit of swelling in her abdomen. So she did go to the vet for that, but it really just kind of went away on its own. That really wasn't a concern either. So when she got attacked by the hawk in January, I thought that is what, obviously she went to the veterinarian, prescribed antibiotics for her wounds and pain medication. Although her wounds healed up quite nicely, that was it. She went downhill fast.
Yeah.
No eating, no drinking. And I also noticed with the lameness, that can also mimic things like marriage
Merrick's.
and things that
Yeah.
would really scare you. So that's why I chose to have a necropsy done, to make sure that she didn't have something that could be spread throughout the entire flock. And honestly, I was shocked when it came back. So I didn't see it coming, and I feel bad, but I really do. I don't know if I could have saved her, is what I'm saying, if I gave her the antibiotics. We always look back and think, but I don't know.
Well, and she may not have been able to. It may be that, between what her body was having to fight off, having to deal with the infection from the hawk, that it just was overwhelmed between the egg yolk peritonitis. Because like you said, you're describing symptoms of a prolonged experience, probably, that she was dealing with egg yolk peritonitis, where it was going in, but her body was able to kind of just deal with it as it was happening. And maybe because she was older, she certainly wasn't ovulating as often or as frequently as she would. So it gave her body time to kind of just be able to flush that and deal with it on its own. And just the dealing with both the infection from the hawk attack and also her body having to fight the symptoms of the egg yolk peritonitis was just too much for her, given her advanced age.
So could you talk a little bit about what are the risk factors for the hens? Is it just genetics? Are there things that we can do to help prevent those types of things occurring in our hens?
I don't think that there is much that one can do to prevent. There are some studies that show that obesity can be a contributing factor for these hens. So I think the best thing that we can do as backyard keepers is to make sure that we are not overfeeding our animals and not contributing, because obviously obesity in hens can lead to a lot more than just egg yolk peritonitis. Can lead to overly large eggs and egg binding, prolapse, vent, a whole bunch of problems. So in addition to, obesity in hens, also going to lead to things like fatty liver syndrome and other things that can kill. So I think as backyard keepers, the best thing we can do is give our animals a well-balanced meal, make sure that they have plenty of space to be able to have physical activity and exercise, and to not give them more treats than it's healthy for them to have. Treats really need to be treats. Like, imagine if you're throwing scratch to your chickens every single day in massive handfuls and quantities. That's like throwing cake to your kids every single day for them to eat. It's the exact same thing. So I would say, make sure that you're giving your animals, their layer or their feed rations, the appropriate ones based on your flock configuration. Plenty of greens, right? Those can always be fed. But anything outside of those two things should be very moderated. Limit the scratch, limit the worms. Especially the dried worms. The dried worms actually have a pretty high fat content to them as well.
Yes, they do. That's very true. We love to give them the bugs. Mine were always free range, so they probably walked 100 miles a day. I know that sounds a little extreme, but literally they would go all over the place. And but there's always things that we look back and we can just try and improve on to improve their chances of having a longer, healthier life. I did read, I don't know, but I did read where the production hens that are bred to obviously
Yes.
pump out eggs continuously, not like heritage breeds. They grow, takes longer to grow, takes longer to produce an egg. But these production hens tend to be the highest on the mortality rate for this type of disease.
Yeah. I think that that's generally true for anything that's related to reproductive issues, is that because these hens have been bred to basically reproduce, ultimately every time they lay an egg, that's their body trying to reproduce, and at such a high ratio that you have far more issues with those breeds than you would with the heritage breeds and or breeds that are just generally not intended to have such a heavy production.
I also read on there about trying to get your hens to giving calcium and things like that too early to younger pullets to kind of get them to lay, get them to lay a little faster. Also, I did read, these are just scientific studies that I did read. One was a study where the daylight hours were
supplementing.
Yeah, they were giving extra daylight. They were giving extra light to produce during the winter instead of giving their bodies a natural break. So I did see a higher risk there. So these are just things that I did try and research prior to add into, because I didn't get a lot of information on risk factors. Like you said, obesity. Making sure they have enough exercise, those types of things. But genetically, played a huge factor, but also, producing hens for eggs, production hens, and, adding supplemental lighting when they would naturally take a break during the winter months and things.
Yep.
So,
I mean, if you're a backyard keeper, I would imagine your main goal is your birds are going to be like your pets for your family. So I would like to advocate on behalf of the animal so that they are allowed to have, let what their body do naturally, which is to have those winter months where they're either slowing in production or they're allowed to stop production entirely as they age. That's good for their bodies just generally. I mean, I understand some of us need to do it for food. So, I'm not going to tell somebody who's, trying
Obviously,
to
right.
feed their family that they shouldn't feed their family during the wintertime, because certainly that's not the case.
Yeah, no disrespect. I certainly didn't mean, if that's your family's source of food, obviously, but these were just some research things, some papers that I did read that just the things to consider. That's all. I mean, definitely not telling anyone how to mind their own flocks. That's for sure. You stay out of my flock, I'll stay out of yours.
But if you're trying to make sure that you can avoid this in your flock, these are all good tips that you can take into consideration as you manage your flock.
Can you talk a little bit, or what knowledge you have on lash egg, and how does this differ from the EYP?
So lash egg, salpingitis. Yeah, that's okay. Salpingitis. It differs in that now the egg has actually, or the yolk has been released into the oviduct, and it does make its way in, but for whatever reason, it doesn't produce. It doesn't follow through. It doesn't make its way through in the normal path, and there's usually it's because there is a bacterial infection, or can actually even be viral sometimes, but normally it's bacterial, and it can lead to the egg yolk lingering in the oviduct, and then the body does what it does, which is try and protect itself, and so it starts to encapsulate that what it sees now as a foreign body, and try to protect itself from it. And when you end up with, if the hen passes it, because it's not also uncommon for once a hen starts to get lash eggs, this actually happened with Annie, with my Angro, for her to start to retain those. So she will start to, again, it goes back to that symptom of they start to feel heavy, they're gaining weight in a very fast manner. they may pass one or two of them, and that would be your first clue. But again, it's another one of those things where without antibiotics, and in this case, where usually you have this problem if it's an older hen, if you can't stop the ovulation, it's just going to keep coming back. It's really hard to combat.
And that's
So
sometimes
it's
you see people with implants. Is that
yeah,
to stop the
the
eggs
ovulation.
production?
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm. Yeah, like Sammy girl, her dad
Yes.
takes her in and gets her implanted because he wants to keep her around for as long as possible.
Yeah.
And obviously, with her lifestyle, she really can't afford to be sitting on the nest all the time.
No. No, that's very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how can we
But
treat that? How is that normally treated? With antibiotics? I mean, I know you said viral. Is that like MG sometimes can cause that? I read some of that.
yeah, yeah, it depends. Yeah, certain viruses can contribute to it, but yeah, normally it's going to be bacterial, and it's typically treated with antibiotics. Again, one of those things where you probably will need to involve a veterinarian in order to get a prescription, depending on your state's requirements. The one thing I do want to say is when we talk about something needs antibiotics, the antibiotics that you would use for one thing is not always the same type of antibiotics that you will use for another thing. So, using an antibiotic that you have maybe previously been given, like Clavamox or something,
Yeah.
which is usually something that we would use for an external wound, right? Is not going to be the same as what you will get if you are dealing with an internal bacterial infection, because you have anaerobic and aerobic bacteria that you're dealing with in those two different scenarios. So the same drugs don't treat the same bacteria. So I do caution people to start trying to treat their animals on their own without knowing exactly what they're treating for, because that's what creates bacterial resistant strains. And we need to.
Yeah. Didn't mean to interrupt you. You can continue, but I know a lot of people that maybe they can't find a veterinarian and they just go to the feed store and they get a general antibiotic, and just because it's not working doesn't mean that it's not treatable, I guess is what I'm saying. You just need a different antibiotic. Yeah.
You may be using the wrong thing. Yep. So you need to know what you're treating. You also could be, by unnecessarily giving your animals antibiotics, you also could be dealing or causing yeast infections in their GI tract. It could build up because you're killing off all the good bacteria along with trying to kill off the bad bacteria. And if your antibiotic isn't even killing the bad bacteria that you want, then you're unnecessarily killing off the good bacteria.
Yes. Very true. Very true. Very, very true. It needs to be seen by a veterinarian.
Most cases, it's very hard to self-treat. It very much is. Unless you have the ability to do the cytology and look at, draw out some fluid from your hen's abdomen and look at it and know what you're seeing under the microscope. It's very, very difficult. So again, I go back to palliative care. The best thing you can do for your animal is just try and keep them comfortable for as long as possible and see if their immunity can work through it. Or if you really know what you're dealing with and you have the right antibiotics, then go ahead and treat as you feel is appropriate. These aren't just symptoms that that you're going to deal with in your chicken flock. These are also things that can come up in turkeys and ducks and geese and other things. So the strain of bacteria that they might be dealing with, or some of the viruses, will be specific to the breed. But
yeah, I was going to ask you, what is your advice for looking for chicken breeds or reputable sources? I know we mentioned a little bit about genetics, and I do think that does play quite a bit into it. That's just me personally. I think the genetics, like with Coco, and now I'm afraid I probably won't breed. I won't. Well, she's gone now, but definitely any of her kids. I worry about hatching any of her offspring's eggs.
As far as breeding is concerned, to be honest, as long as you're not breeding individuals that are actually actively carrying issues. I mean, again, Coco was 8, right? So she did live a pretty decent long life. And it doesn't necessarily mean that she's predisposed or that her offspring will necessarily be predisposed.
True.
Inbreeding is the biggest problem. where, if you were to breed her offspring with more of her offspring, where now you're going to potentially bring in, the potential for maybe something that might otherwise be recessive to display itself or to come to play into the individuals that you're breeding. That would be my best advice on breeding. As far as hatcheries and those kinds of things, I don't know. I haven't done enough research on which hatcheries are the best. I've talked to different vets, and every vet has different ones that they like or that they think are the good ones to deal with. I would just say, make sure that whoever you're dealing with is an ethical breeder and that they're doing things for the betterment of the animals that they're breeding and not just to make money.
I know we talked a little bit about the implant, but I don't think that's available here. Is that true? I think it's only in other countries. Okay.
No, it's available here. It's available here. It's not available. Well,
right,
it's
not
not supposed to be used for a bunch of different things, right? So, but yeah, no, it's available here, and it's used in the United States. Not every veterinarian wants to deal with it or to do it, so you have to find the veterinarian that's willing to work with you and do those kinds of things. But I would imagine that most avian vets, if they're working with birds and they're going to be doing those kinds of birds in parrots and other types of birds. So, doing it in a chicken, or a duck or something it's just up to them on whether or not they're willing to treat those animals.
Thank you for your answer. Appreciate that. I never had to deal with it, so I couldn't remember. I know I've seen lots of people that take their birds to get their implants every so often, once it starts wearing off. And but I've never,
6 months.
I don't know anyone personally that in real life that has, a chicken that has an implant. But I mean, I do, now that I'm looking back, I did have a bunch of guilt over Coco, missing some of those things, because I always preach about being, doing your chicken exams and keeping your eyes on them and stuff, and I contributed all of her stuff just from slowing down and from being, because she never really was like sick. She was just like little things popped up here and there, and they just all kind of overlaid together with other things. She was always eating, she was always drinking, she was always top hen. Even then, she was, running those hens off. She was in charge. And it wasn't until that hawk attack that I think, like you said, it was just too much stress. And she just succumbed to it. So, but she had 8 great years here. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah. She's a good little mama hen. Yeah, it's hard with egg yolk peritonitis or anything that, again, because there are just so many contributing factors, and the symptoms often can look like something else. So it is very difficult to know. It's just the hardest part about keeping.
Okay. Well, that's all my questions, unless you've got something else you want to add. It is always an honor to have you on. Always.
Well, I love coming on and getting a chance to chat with you and see your gorgeous face in the morning.
It's technically not morning here. It's almost noon here. So
yeah, that's true.
It's your morning.
But it's my morning, so I still get to see your face in my morning.
Well, you're not under lockdown yet, are you? We're under lockdown. Oh, goodness. So, and lockdown is really starting to suck, because mine are used to free ranging. I bet. And I say that all the time. But once your birds have grown up that way, I mean, we had babies free ranging with their mamas here, and we never lost one from any kind of hawk or anything. I mean, we honestly didn't. Mr. Jangles was very good about hiding them and all that stuff. And what made me so mad is that Coco was attacked while she was in the enclosure. But I think she was just so slow that, she just didn't make it in. Everybody else was up. But not to go back on that again, but lockdown is really starting to suck. My chickens want out, but we're not doing that. And we're not letting any broodies hatch, any babies out in the environment. I have 3 broodies right now, and I'm fighting with them. But nobody is allowed to hatch outside. Not right now. But I may be I may be tempted to bring Oreo inside my she shed and let her hatch some babies. Because
let her have some babies inside.
Miss Pumpkin is great.
How's Miss Pumpkin?
Basically destroyed my house, though. Right now, I just I just cleaned out her pen, and she was not doing too good there. She was
Yeah.
molting. It was winter time,
Oh,
it
got
was
it.
really, really cold. So I didn't even,
Mhm.
she has her own dust bath and stuff inside. So it's not like she doesn't get to dust bath and play in dirt and stuff, but she hadn't been able to go
Yeah.
outside, especially with all that was going on, plus flock down. Where would I put her? I'd have to put
Yeah.
her with a flock, and she fights with everybody. So I'm building her a covered area just to go outside in by herself. But anyway, she has
Mhm.
completely destroyed her entire pen today. There's pine shavings everywhere, and her color on her face is coming back now. So, yeah, she's doing good.
Oh, good.
We went through a little bit of a not such a good time because of the weather and the flock down, and you had to really think on your toes. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Can I do? And Patsy's in my she shed because she got
Yeah.
in a fight with her group. She's always been top hen in the Old English Gamebird pen. There was an upruling, and they kicked her out. I mean, they kicked her out. And I've
Mm,
tried 3 times to put her back in, and all they're doing
poor
is fighting.
girl.
So now she stays in my she shed until I figure out what to do with her.
Oh
I may put
gosh.
her and Pumpkin together. Uh,
How old is she now?
Patsy is, let's see, Patsy is at least 4. When I got her, she was full grown. She
Okay.
and Cat,
Yeah, maybe
yeah,
see if
that's
her
what I'm
and
thinking.
Pumpkin
They're
can be
just
buddies
because
now.
Patsy is
They
actually
can,
is Patsy came with Cash in June and Reba and Loretta. And Loretta was killed by the rat snake. And
Mhm.
Patsy is actually no bigger than Pumpkin is. So Cash was way too big for her. And they came from a friend of mine who had to get
Mhm.
rid of all her chickens. And they were actually came as a group. And I'm not sure how old they were when I first got them. They were laying eggs when I got them. So, but anyway, she was way too small for Cash. So I moved her into the Old English Gamebird pen, which is the same size as her. But then yada 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 yada, tragic broke out last week. So now we stuck with a
Oh,
chicken in here, a chicken in there, and I got 6 baby chicks in my house that hatched out in the incubator.
I saw them. They're so cute and
Those are
fluffy.
the
I just want
babies
to sniff
of
them.
these are not Loretta, Laverne and Shirley, my 2 lavenders that I purchased from hatching eggs, and my
Mhm.
Easter eggers or olive eggers. That's their eggs times Mr. Jangles. So these are my goal was to
Yeah.
create fresh new stock out of Mr. Jangles. Obviously, it's not a purebred because I
Yeah.
didn't use Penelope's eggs with Mr. Jangles, so I use these girls to create um, something new. So I'm hoping I get a rooster out of that, and then I can put.
Yeah. How much turnover in your flock do you actually experience on an annual basis? I know this is a difficult conversation, but honestly,
Oh,
I
that's a
think
good
that this
one.
is something that
No, we don't.
we never talk about really, you know. We don't talk about it. I mean, I haven't done any posts about with what I was going on with, you know, with my
Hmm.
girls, and I've lost 2
Yeah.
birds in the last, you know, 3 months. And I know you in a larger flock, it's a normal part of flock keeping. We never talk about just the natural attrition that happens because birds
Yeah.
pass away for
I've
whatever
never thought
reason.
about that. I'll have to, I mean, not never, but like with Coco passed
Yeah.
and Loretta passed.
Yeah.
Well, she was killed by a rat snake, but one of my Old English, Miss Brittany, last year. So there's a few. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a few, and some of the roosters that I've had over the years have went to other farms, so I don't keep all of them either. So
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
we've not lost a whole lot, honestly, but we have lost a few.
Yeah.
And most of the roosters, like I said, do go to other farms. I currently have 12 roosters, and that's too many. So I have 3 right now that are probably going to go to another place. Now, I don't get rid of them just to get rid of
Okay.
them. And I know some people, they eat their extra roosters, which, I mean, teach their own. These little Bantam guys, I don't know. They'd be like little rotisserie chickens, I guess. Personally, I couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, personally, I
Hey, yeah, they're
couldn't
such
eat
cute little
them,
boys
but
though.
I do know a few little farms that
Yeah.
may want 1 or 2, but that's reality of it. And That's absolutely the reality of it. If you're hatching your own birds, you're going to end up with extras. Most people keep their hens, of course, and then all these extra roosters. And I did make a post about this not too long ago about how many roosters, because that's probably my most asked question. How many roosters do I have? And I have 12. And people are like, oh my gosh, how do you deal with that? They're all in mini flocks. They're all separated. And you're right. It does get to a point. I can't keep separating groups. I can't have 100 groups here. I mean,
you don't have enough room for that many runs and coops and stuff. Exactly.
To put more. So you're right. But yeah, there is going to be some turnover this year. I don't know how many roosters I have in that 6 little baby chicks. So that's part of it. That's just the reality of it. Some people...
It's one of the harder things. I mean, especially if you're going to do a breeding program, because you can't just keep breeding and breeding and breeding, and you've got to give some away, or
that's absolutely true, and that's a reality I'm facing right now. So, which isn't anything new, but you can have too many. So, yeah.
At what point do you go from a chicken keeper to a chicken hoarder?
The reason why I don't know how to answer this is because when you asked that, it almost sunk into my little heart. I was like, oh my gosh, she's right. One, I have to figure this out. I've figured it out over the years, but it's been pretty easy, to be honest, because the extra roosters I have haven't been that many. And I've been able to find homes for them. And what happens after that, I really, I don't know. I can't. And I have to figure out what I'm going to do next. Now, I'm not sure what I should do. Yes.
Do you name every single one of your birds?
Yes.
And you remember all of their names? Oh my gosh, Mel. If I had as many birds as you, I'd be like, I can't remember, or this one, I get confused with that one all the time. I don't know how you keep track of them all. That's a lot.
Which I'm not breeding any more of those. I don't know. I may just let that pen eventually die out. Not to sound cruel, but just age out, I guess. Just not breed any more of them. So, but in that group, they the males have names, but all of the only English game bird girls are just called Miss Brittany's. They've always been called that. And then I have the Bantam, I have the Bantam Easter eggers that are in that pen. They all have names. So, because they are all individually look different.
Okay.
The Brittany's in there all look like Miss Pumpkin. They all look exactly the same. Except I could pick Miss Pumpkin out.
Yeah.
I do. They all do have names, and I know them all as of right now. My chicks don't have names.
That's crazy.
And my quail are all just quail, because quail.
Quail. How's that going with keeping quail? It's different, yeah?
The very first one.
Wow,
now,
that's
I am
fun.
going to expand that program. I think I'm going to do some type of breeding program with my quail, maybe. I only have 7.
Okay,
so.
fine.
And my quail aviary that I built is probably overkill. I mean, it's way too much for them. So that means I can add quail, and they're so little. So
yes. Well, we always tell people all the time, when you're building a coop and you're deciding to build a coop, build more than what you need, because chicken math, right?
That's exactly what we did. I mean, we built a whole floor for it. It has a separate hutch that they can go into. It's completely covered in hardware cloth. I mean, top, bottom, all around. It was one of my birthday gifts and my Christmas gift, and all those things mixed together.
Nice.
So, yeah, I could fit a lot more.
Nice.
Yep. Okay, that gives me something to think about, and I'd like to know if our listeners, what they would do if they do raise their own and hatch their own. What do you do with the extra chickens that you may have? Most people, like I said, keep their hens, but they do tend to rehome or cook up some roosters. No judgment here. So But we love you. We appreciate you. And we hope to have you back on again. And I'll see you. I'll see you around. Bye, y'all. Love you. Bye.
See you too. Love you. Bye.
I'm Mel, and you are listening to Wilma the Wonder Hen.